after 15 years. But perhaps more important, Google restructured and became Alphabet, of which Google, the brand that we know, is a subsidiary of now amongst many others, including Waymo. In 2016, on the 21st of June, we know how that story began. We still don't know how that story is going to end, and maybe we won't this time in 10 years from now. We will see. But what we do know is 2016 finally became the year when we could stop talking about the year of mobile. That was it. The year when mobile internet traffic exceeded desktop, and that really defined the decade and will define how we operate in the next decade. 2017. 2018, the European Union released finally clarity on the GDPR, and it became the most important change in data privacy regulation in 20 years, and undoubtedly will define the next 10 years as well. In 2018, a tech company briefly became the most valuable company in the world, and that tech company was Apple. But in 2019, it was very quickly replaced. There we go. In 2019, it was quickly replaced by Microsoft and Amazon, who this year have been battling it out for that top spot as the most valuable company in the world. But what's remarkable is it's taken just 10 years for the global economy to change from one of being petrochemicals and banking companies as the top 5 companies in the world to being all digital technology companies: Microsoft, Amazon, Apple, Alphabet, and Facebook. Just 10 years for such a remarkable change. So what can we learn from that little look back to help us define the future? Well, in summary, I think there were 4 significant changes. The touchscreen really took control. We saw that in 2016. Smartphones and tablets really changed the way that we engage with the internet. And quietly, that led to people of all ages becoming engaged, because it's much easier to tap and swipe than it is to double click. And so people, particularly in the 60-plus age group, more than tripled their engagement with the internet. And I think that's something that will actually also define our future, will define the way that we approach the next decade. And while they did that, the world logged on. As we started the last decade, about 30% of the world was using the internet. As we end this decade, about 60% of the world is using the internet. And that is largely driven by the growth in internet penetration in Asia and South America. And finally, consumers do now care about their data. GDPR made sure of that. And customers, consumers, will now ask companies to delete their data, and they will opt out from companies collecting their data as well. A significant trend that will undoubtedly define the future. And it will define some of the topics that we talk about here today. Our first speaker will ensure that we cover that quite well. So the future's bright. It's very bright. We mustn't dwell too much on the past. Life moves fast. Business moves fast, as we've seen in the last 10 years. And we must move faster in order to thrive and survive in the next decade. So we're going to move fast now, because I'm bang on time. Damien Bennett is our next speaker. He's the Director of Strategy at Incubeta, and he's going to ask you, is he a bad person? Thank you very much.
Who has seen an advertisement that has convinced you that your microphone is listening to your conversations? All of your interactions, your credit card swipes, web searches, locations, likes, they're all collected in real time into $1 trillion a year industry.
The real game changer was Cambridge Analytica.
They'd worked for the Trump campaign and for the Brexit campaign.
They started using information warfare.
Cambridge Analytica claimed to have 5,000 data points on every American voter.
I started tracking down all these Cambridge Analytica ex-employees.
Someone else that you should be calling to the committee is Brittany Kaiser.
Brittany
Brittany Kaiser, once a key player inside Cambridge Analytica, casting herself as a whistleblower.
The reason why Google and Facebook are the most powerful companies in the world is because last year data surpassed oil in value. Data is the most valuable asset on Earth. We targeted those whose minds we thought we could change until they saw the world the way we wanted them to. I do know that their targeting tool was considered a weapon.
There is a possibility that the American public had been experimented on.
This is becoming a criminal matter. When people see the extent of the surveillance, I think they're going to be shocked.
And I still fear for your life.
Yeah.
With the powerful people that are involved.
But I can't keep quiet just because it'll make powerful people mad.
Data rights should be considered just fundamental rights.
This is about the integrity of our democracy.
These platforms which were created to connect us have now been weaponized. It's impossible to know what is what, because nothing is what it seems.
The world will change more over the next 10 years than it has over the past 50. Climate change has become a climate crisis. And over the next 10 years, it might become a climate meltdown. Economic power is shifting from the West to the East. And there is political instability both at home and abroad. I believe very strongly that if we're to face these challenges and to resolve them, then data will be absolutely crucial to that. But the reality is that data has become a dirty word. The public are concerned about how their data is used. They're concerned about the security of their data. They're concerned about how their data is exploited. And they're concerned about being under surveillance. There isn't a day that goes by in my job where I don't talk to somebody about data, where I don't talk to somebody about how data can help them to target audiences better, about how data can be used to serve more effective creative. But the bad press and the name of data has made me really question myself and ask this question, which is, am I a bad person? Am I part of the problem? And it's this word in particular that runs counter to everything that I believe in. I believe that everybody has the right to privacy. It is a fundamental human right. And it would be completely counter to everything that I believe to think that what I did was surveillance. And you saw this in the trailer that I showed, that word surveillance come up 3 or 4 separate times. And I just don't think that that accurately paints what I do. Surveillance is the careful watching of a person or place. And in digital advertising, we don't do that. We don't do it because what we do is we aggregate data sets. We look at common themes and we aggregate data. And by doing that, we also make that anonymous. So whilst there's a lot of conjecture out there, which is about digital advertising putting people under surveillance, I do not believe that that's true. What is true, however, is that data has been exploited, and it has been used for the wrong purposes. But I think that's true of every commodity. You could look at water, oil, gas, and you could find people that had exploited those for dangerous purposes. The issue isn't data. The issue is people and the way that some people exploit data. And it's without a doubt that that exploitation of data has led to changes in our society. It helped get President Trump elected, and it helped drive the result of the European referendum. But this isn't anything new. Whenever new mediums come about, whenever there's new ways to engage and connect with audiences, people always exploit that medium, and it always drives change in society. When the industrial printing press came about, it helped to drive the French Revolution. The Nazis very carefully used radio to share their evil message. And there isn't a presidential candidate over the past 50 years that hasn't used smear ads, attack ads on television. So what can we do about it? How can we stop people exploiting data and using it for the wrong purposes? I think it comes down to us and the way in which we behave. And if we want data to be a force for good, we have to lead from the front. And for me, that means leading by 4 clear principles. The first is to be clear with how we're using data. The second is to make sure that any data we are using is secure. The third is to make sure that we're using data to be helpful. And the fourth is that when we use data, we use it and we're honest with the messaging that we go to market with. So be clear. Make sure your audience knows what you're collecting and how it will be used. And crucially, I think for most people, for most businesses rather, this means making that clear in plain English, not using legal jargon that nobody understands. The second is be secure. And if you want to be secure as an organization, then you need to make sure that data security runs through your organization. Data breaches typically happen because somebody does not follow a process internally. The third, be helpful. Use data to aid, not obstruct. My biggest bugbear about digital advertising is that data is so often used to serve people ads which are frankly annoying. Annoying ads aren't successful ads. Helpful ads are successful ads. The fourth is to be honest. Use messaging that resonates but doesn't mislead. We can use data to serve messaging which really resonates with people, that makes a connection, but we must not use it to take advantage of them. The key to these principles is that we all make this concerted effort. The challenge with data at the moment is it's a bit of a cat and mouse game, where nobody wants to make the first move to be more secure, to be more clear, to be more helpful, and to be more honest. And we have to show some leadership in this area. And the reality is, if we don't show leadership in this area, then people like Alexander Nix, like Steve Bannon, and like Dominic Cummings will set the agenda for how data is viewed by the public. And so I really do believe that data is an important force for good. But I think it's down to everybody to make sure that it's used in the right way. And I think if we use it in the right way, those headlines that are negative and that scare the public will change to positive headlines. They'll change to headlines like how the average age has increased because of improvements that data has driven in healthcare. How education levels are higher because of data. And perhaps even how data has helped to resolve the climate crisis. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Damien. A fascinating topic. We've got a couple of minutes for questions. Remember, please do put your questions in if you have any on Slido. If you take a seat, Damien, on SLI .do and it's Incubeta Ignite. A couple of questions have already come in. If you have any more, please put them in here. Otherwise, speak to Damien afterwards. So one question we've got here is it really ethical to use data for advertising, or are we kidding ourselves?
I think... oh, my microphone. Oh, it's back on now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it can absolutely be ethical for advertising as long as you follow the 4 principles. You know, that's the most important thing. People have to know what data you're collecting and why you're using it. And in fact, actually, if you use data in the right way, it can make the experience much better for customers. And so I actually think that, yes, using data in the right way can be very ethical in advertising.
It can be, okay. Is it too optimistic to think that there will be a world where people don't exploit data? Or oil, for that matter?
Yeah, I think it's optimistic to think that people will never exploit data, but it's also optimistic to think that people won't exploit other media forms. You know, there's very large newspapers in this country that are exploiting people with news all the time. Mm-hmm. I think the reality is that you need to set the agenda in the same way that the news has, that data can be a force for good in the same way that newspapers largely are.
James O asks, Damien, can you imagine a kite mark style ratification of companies that adhere to your principles that you spoke about?
Yeah.
Yeah? IAB or someone?
Yeah, I think that I mean, to be honest with you, I think that's probably the most logical way in which that happens, is that a group like IAB helps to drive this change, because I think, you know, at the moment it is a bit of a cat and mouse game where everybody is afraid to move because having a stricter data policy internally puts them at a disadvantage compared to their competitors. So I think a group does need to take control of it.
And in 10 seconds, who do you think's leading the field in taking a stand and using data right and not breaking the rules and really doing it properly?
I think Apple are doing a lot, you know. I think that they're the ones that are making the headlines.
Right, one word answer. Were Cambridge Analytica really bad guys, or are they just very effective at utilising data? Final question.
So knowing specifically what they did, they clearly and obviously broke the rules.
Yeah.
So yes, they were bad people.
Very good. Thank you very much, Damien. Very good. Thank you very much. Fascinating topic. Thank you, Damien. So our next speaker, I'm delighted to welcome to the stage. She's Kate Jervis. She's our head of analytics at DQ&A, and she's here to talk about data and its road ahead. So, Kate, please welcome you to the stage. Thank you.
So today I'm here to talk about data and the road ahead, most specifically in relation to moving forward after GDPR. And as Damien has just talked about, it's really important that we as marketers have principles going forwards. And whilst that's a valiant effort for us all to do that, I think we need to be very awake to the fact that how some people in the industry have behaved previously means we now have restrictions on what we're able to do. And those restrictions are going to be enforced through legislation, but also through browsers and through particular platforms that we'll be using. And it's going to be a challenging time ahead in the next decade. And the challenge specifically that I'm going to talk about today is the fact that the perfect single customer view does not exist. Now, some of you will be looking at this and thinking, of course it doesn't, it's never existed. And I would wholeheartedly agree with you. But I think what's changed after GDPR is the fact that we're now less able to move towards this as an endpoint. You know, we've spent the past 10 years, particularly kind of since 2012, talking about this, aiming for this. We've kind of squirreled away our data for years and years and years, trying to build out this perfect approach. And actually, it's not really sustainable anymore. It's not really something we can aim for. And there are obviously a couple of reasons why that's the case. So I just wanted to recap what has happened so far with cookie legislation, with GDPR. So pre-2011, there was no EU guidance on cookie collection and storage. And then in 2011, the EU directive came in and pretty much said consent is required to drop non-essential cookies. Now, this is a bit vague. We all know that the directive and GDPR in particular are quite vague. And so the ICO has been really helpful within our industry and came out to say, ultimately, implied consent at this point was permitted. And then the kind of sweet spot of the industry begins. So in 2012, we all start going off thinking we can collect everything and anything. We all get very obsessed with our data capture policies. And actually, this is probably the point at which things start to go a little bit wrong for us, because rather than asking what do we need, we start to ask what can we get, let's get everything. And through that, and through how people have misused data, we have been obviously led to 2019 when GDPR came into effect. And what that was the meaning of consent changing, and that meant it changed from being implied consent to direct consent. So no more pre-ticked acceptance for cookies, no more kind of automatic on-sliders when you're saying whether or not you'll share your data. And it's kind of brought about some big challenges in terms of how we talk about analytics and how we talk about measurement, because a couple of months after GDPR came into effect, the ICO came out and said that analytics is considered a non-essential cookie. Now, what an essential cookie is something that is required for your site to function. So that might be something that helps with load balancing, or it might be the cookie that remembers what a consumer has put into the basket when they go to the checkout. Analytics, on the other hand, not required for that to happen, not required in order to make a site functional. If a consumer goes onto your site and you're not tracking them, they have no idea. The customer experience doesn't change. And so if we take what the ICO are saying as a given, and there's some debate about whether or not we should do that, then we're in a situation where we're looking at a cookieless future. So where does that leave us from an advertising point of view? Well, I think, as Damien alluded to earlier, the key importance really is to start being clear with our users around what we're collecting. But it does bring about a challenge. If we start to enforce cookie policies where analytics is non-essential and users can choose not to share that data with us, then we are starting to limit what we have access to. So first limitation, legislation, depending on how we take it, is going to be a challenge to the data that we collect. But on top of that, we also have challenges through people like Mozilla. This affects about 5% of the UK because this browser doesn't allow you to track third-party cookies. And also through ITP with Apple, which basically blocks first-party cookies that act like trackers. So any first-party cookies that are required for your site are fine, but anything that behaves similarly to a tracker is completely disregarded. And there's this great stat from Blockmetry, which I think will surprise a lot of people, which was done in 2018, which showed that between 8 to 20% of analytics tracking is already blocked. So it's 8% in the UK, and I think 11% in the US, and then 19 to 20% is around France and Germany. So we're in a situation where quite a lot of analytics activity is already blocked. Depending on what we do in relation to analytics cookies and how far we take that ICO guidance, we could be looking at that increasing. And so I wanted to talk today about a couple of options that are in discussion in the industry about what to do in relation to cookieless tracking and where we should be heading. And the first thing is fingerprinting. So this might be something that you've all heard of, and it's not fingerprinting in terms of how you use your iPhone, but it's a data procedure that ultimately allows you to map data across sources. So what I'm ultimately talking about is a very sophisticated version of a user ID. And actually, very interestingly, Mail Online have already done this as a way to get around their ITP tracking issues. So definitely a potential sort of short-term solution. But it turns out that the EU have thought ahead of this already. And GDPR legislation actually doesn't just restrict cookies, but it also restricts anything that behaves like a cookie. So when we're going down the route at the moment of thinking, what else can I put into place to make sure I'm collecting this data, we have to kind of think outside the box. We have to think in a completely new way, because anything that behaves like a cookie is technically not within the realms of possibility anymore. So then if we think about true cookieless tracking, which means excluding anything that is even behaving like a cookie, then perhaps we need to think about session-based measurement. Now, this is a kind of divisive topic in the industry at the moment, because we have been, for the past 5 years at least, really focused on users. You know, when we talk about marketing, we talk about customer-centric marketing, we talk about putting the customer first. And that's because analytics has allowed us to do that to a certain extent. But what moving to session-based measurement would mean would be literally going back to, this is what happens last click, this is what happens within a session, within a page visit, and I'm not looking at the user anymore. Interestingly, this would give you 100% of data. So if all you care about is having the most accurate data, this is your solution. But obviously it then brings up some questions around what do we do with all the knowledge that we now have, which is that last click attribution doesn't work. We can no longer just look at single sessions. But very interestingly, there's a growing number of tools in market. So this is a big ongoing discussion in the industry about which way do we now turn. And then already poached by Damien, it's like he knew I was going to have this slide earlier. There is also a discussion happening within the industry about whether we should do something outside of just business by business. You know, what we're talking about today and all of the challenges around measurement, it's not a business challenge, it's not a singular challenge. It is an industry challenge that doesn't just impact advertising, but also impacts every other digital industry out there that is using data. So the IAB came out and proposed a potential solution around almost creating like an imprint, a customer imprint that gets passed through all of the digital supply chain, regardless of where somebody is, regardless of what business they're interacting with. And the idea being that it's compliance, and we have joint accountability, so that if we're all collecting the same data or we're all viewing the same data, and within that we have to be compliant within certain legislation, that it will improve what we're doing for users and how transparent we're able to be. Kind of a bit of a long shot, in terms of it would take a lot of changing within the industry, but I think it's really interesting to hear people talking about it, and perhaps at the end of this decade we'll be talking about the success of this and actually how it's changed how we deal with data. So those are a couple of solutions that have been talked about, and if you have any more questions on those, please come and see me afterwards. But I just wanted to end by talking about, I guess, what I'm thinking in relation to the challenge. And given that I'm the head of analytics ad agency, and my bread and butter is working with data, it might surprise you that I'm feeling quite buoyant about the future. But I would really say the key is to now have a positive mindset. As an analyst, it's very, very difficult not to think about what I don't have and instead concentrate on what I do have. But if we look at how the industry has changed over the past 10 years, we can see that we have far better insight. We can see that we have far better skill set in terms of prioritizing things like data science, prioritizing people who are able to start looking at AI and machine learning. And we can also see from a technology point of view how much it's changed as well. And I think there's a real tendency we have to obsess so much about progress and what that looks like, and it always involves getting more data, doing better. And actually, I feel if we just stood still for a second and just dealt with what we already have and just started taking some actual action instead of getting in our own way so much with our obsessive thinking, then it would be a far easier journey from here on out. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. That was very, very interesting indeed. Again, Slido, if you have any questions, please send them on up. There's none in there currently. A lot of what you spoke about there obviously relates to GDPR in Europe and how that's affecting our ecosystem here in the UK and in Europe. Do you see that also applying internationally as well in other markets?
Definitely. I think it's a wider trend around consumers, and obviously your stats are showing how many people are going online, but also that's showing how many people are getting a lot more savvy in terms of what they're sharing. So I think whilst we kind of have the legislation and we're leading the way, I think it will have a natural impact.
Very good. Okay.
Are you trying to think of some interesting
I'm trying
GDPR
to think of some
questions?
interesting questions, not GDPR. What one technology do you think will really thrive in the next 10 years that people should be considering when it comes to data and measurement?
I think realistically things around, we talk about AI as an industry and we primarily talk about it from a consumer experience point of view, but I think in terms of using AI to churn data to get more interesting insights, will free up our capacity as an industry to actually do more with the data. Right now we're still in a position where we're very, very focused on what we're doing with the data from a methodology, from an analytical point of view, rather than from an action point of view. Yeah. And I can't say the words actionable insight more than I do on a daily basis, but it really needs to be where our focus is.
Yeah. So we spend too much time thinking about what we're doing, and by the time we figured it out, it's out of date.
Precisely.
Anyway, right? Okay, a couple of questions to Kate. What are your views on acquisition versus retention?
Just generally overall, I'm not entirely sure I understand that question.
We're moving on to the next one then. If you can't collect enough data in GA360, is GA360 worth the money? Controversial one.
Yes, well, I think there's it's a bit of a framing question really, because a lot of the time when people talk about GA360, they primarily talk about the sampling limits and the differences there, but actually in terms of the investment into the product, there's a lot more from a customization point of view, from an integration point of view, if you're using the rest of the Google marketing platform. And I think that it gets a bit of a missell just being an enterprise level tool, because actually the level of customization for me is probably the selling point.
This one's interesting. Who decides if something behaves like a cookie?
That's a very good question. Well, there is a logical way that a cookie behaves in terms of how it collects data, how it's dropped onto a user computer. And so when you think about user IDs, they perform the same function as a cookie, just with slightly different technology, because they're still dropping onto your computer, being stored at a browser level, and then passing back to a server. So in terms of how they behave, user IDs are very similar, so it's very easy to draw the comparison. In terms of beyond that, I guess it's a legislative point, which I'm sure will be very vague, so there are opportunities here for us to exploit. It's just a question of how sustainable they are.
There's a couple more questions. You showed an example, a poor example of data consent from Cosmopolitan. Cosmo. Any examples of those who are doing it well?
We do actually have a slideshow somewhere at Incubeta about people who are doing well, who are doing good cookie policies. So come and see me afterwards.
We can share that.
I'm sure we can share it.
Okay, one more. Let me. Okay, if AI and machine learning are just, it's moving. Sorry, is AI and machine learning just another opportunity for Google and Facebook to dominate?
Yes, in a way, because obviously in terms of resources and manpower, it's a really easy way for them to use what they have. But I think there's probably more interesting examples in other industries outside of advertising. So for instance, financial, pharmaceutical, I think healthcare, there's a lot of interesting examples of AI and machine learning that sit outside of Google. And I think we could do a better job at looking at other industries and kind of cross-pollinating ideas rather than just constantly thinking about what's happening in the ad space with Google and Facebook.
Very good. There's lots more questions in there, but we've run out of time. So thank you very much, Kate. That was very interesting indeed. Thank you. So a lot of talk about data, of course, and analytics and measurement, but the next decade may be very well defined by something more creative. So I'm delighted to welcome onto the stage Farah Qureshi, who's an interactive producer in EMEA for Joystick, who's here to talk about the future of advertising is conversational. So please welcome Farah to the stage.
Let's remove this instantly. Right. So I'm here today to talk to you about the future of advertising, which we think is conversational. For those of you who don't know Joystick, we are a creative and production agency, and we obviously have an amazing team of designers and developers, and obviously producers as well, that basically create all this wonderful digital media. But let's talk about the future. So actually, no, let's talk about where we are right now. So we live in a world where essentially we want to make our lives easier. We create all this technology, like the likes of Alexa, etc. Because essentially, we want to make our lives easier. We want to make it much more functional, much more simple, more efficient. And I think inherently as a human race, we're quite lazy. So as we become much more accustomed to living in an AI world, so for example, you have things like Alexa, Siri, self-driving cars like Tesla, Amazon drone delivery thing that's happening, Nest, the learning thermostat. I'm actually just moved house, so I'm kind of really geeking out on home tech at the moment. And even things like algorithms for Amazon and Spotify recommendations, things that we take for granted. So as much as we're getting more accustomed to this AI world, in the future, we're going to expect all aspects of our lives to be operating much the same way and much more AI way. So when we apply that to marketing, we know that we need to make our marketing much more engaging, much more helpful, much more personal. We all know this. But in a real life world, the best way to be engaging, best way to be helpful and personal would be via human interaction. So for example, if you went into a store, the salesperson would take you through lots of complex myriad of products and give you a product recommendation. But obviously this doesn't scale. So obviously, where do we go from here? How can we take this to the next level? How do you make personalized experiences or conversations work with your audience, but on a much more massive scale? So let's answer this question. So what if we could have conversations with our audience in an ad? So what would that look like, and how would that work? So this is where conversational AI comes in. And all it is really is using messaging apps, using chatbots, using voice-activated assistants to essentially automate communication and make customer experiences personalized, but at a much more bigger scale. So this is conversational ads. So our partners at Google have been tapping this technology in a really innovative way via an ad format called ad lingo. So it's essentially how a chatbot would work on your website, but it's just housed in a display ad, very much like this example here. But it's all powered by conversational AI technology. So essentially when the user clicks on the ad, the conversation thread starts, but the user will literally stay on that website that they found this on and won't necessarily go onto the brand's website. So I've actually got two examples, two kind of live examples to show you, just to show you the user interaction and how it all works. So let's talk about the benefits. So one of the benefits is the fact that because it's powered by Google, you'll be able to tap into their huge network of sites and also their data targeting tools as well. But one of the biggest benefits for me especially is the fact that you're talking to new users. So by talking to these new users, those users who haven't necessarily gone onto your website, you can gain really valuable insight into things like their customer pain points, preferences, their complaints, etc. And all that's like really good intel for you to use in future campaigns. So when users ask you questions and you find out information right there and then without then the user going on to or clicking out to a website, it can essentially help you close the funnel a lot faster and kind of potentially secure more conversions as well. And AdLingo have actually seen quite some quite promising results. So at the moment, active conversation time is about 1 minute 46 on average, which is quite a long time considering you're talking to one-on-one on someone, and 3.2 brand interactions with each user on average too. And this also kind of appeals to different buyers in different stages of the cycle as well. So for example, if you have an awareness campaign, you can utilize it for brand image building. If your objective is much more kind of engagement, you can utilize it for kind of personalized product recommendations or even product education as well. Or simply just use it for demand generation as well. So you can utilize this ad format in whichever way that you want. So when it comes to getting started on any AI project that you are, it really does require you to understand, really know your consumer, what their needs are, how they're going to interact with you. So understanding the way audiences interact with your brand is very crucial. So, I mean, there's lots of ways to prepare for conversational AI. I mean, obviously, it's quite a complex setup. And there's lots of different bits to actually think about before you get started. But I think the three main things would be to establish specialized objectives and goals. So really understand what the purpose of the conversational AI project is going to be. How will it actually help your customers along their journey? So really have thoughtful planning and objectives and goals that can basically essentially lead to really great execution. Second one, be sure that you understand what your users will be expecting from the product, anticipate what they would say, just so that you will basically create a much more kind of useful, engaging interaction. And the third one is kind of links with the second one, design for conversation. So be sure that you invest time, in terms of the conversation dialogue, the conversation flow, how you're actually presenting your information to the user, because effectively you're giving your brand a voice, you're giving your brand a persona, so you kind of want to make sure that you nail all of these before you get started. So I'm going to just leave it with Bart Simpson here. He's saying that he won't fight the future, and neither can we, which was very cheesy. But essentially, conversational ads is the next big thing. So yeah, watch this space.
Thank you very much. It's very exciting. I also moved house recently and geeked out on turning everything conversational. Quite good fun.
Yeah. I think I might have to curb it. It's costing me a lot.
Right. And there's some questions in here, but the first one is the Disney one.
Yeah.
If you were to type in there, how many strands of hair does Elsa have? Do you know what the answer would be?
The chatbot would, though.
Would it?
The AdLingo ad format definitely would give you the answer.
Does anyone know the answer? 420,000 strands of hair Elsa has. I learned that in my research for today. That's 4 times the average human being.
Wow.
There you go. Anyway, now on to proper questions. Okay, the first one. What is needed to implement conversational AI?
So essentially, the main component would be the actual chatbot tool. So there's quite a few out there, like Dialogflow. There's I was going to say Live Nation. That's not right. Live Person even. Microsoft Bot framework as well. So you'll just need to get on board that. But in terms of the conversation, the flow and the dialogue and everything else, and the aesthetic of the creative, that's all to do with the brand.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of questions coming in, so we'll have to pick those up afterwards as well. But one of them that keeps me, how does GDPR work with conversational ads?
Yeah. How
much data and learning can you gain from them?
Okay, so AdLingo doesn't actually keep any of the chat scripts. That basically sits with the user and the advertiser. So it's all kind of in compliance with the advertiser's privacy policy and the data laws, etc.
Mm-hmm. How long will it take to get from brief to execution of a campaign live?
I think, I don't know. I would like to say, maybe about 4 to 6 weeks. That's my usual thing that I used to like to say. Yeah. But because this has quite a lot of detailed backup information that you need to set up, and also a lot of thinking, like I mentioned in the presentation, needs to go in terms of the conversation flow and the dialogue, because there are so many iterations of possibilities of conversation threads that there are. So possibly maybe 2 months. I don't know. It depends on the complexity.
Do you see it? Do you see ever a time when Minority Report becomes a reality and the billboards? We're having a conversation with the billboards as we walk past.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think so.
I actually. Towards that.
I think that's happening like already, like via your phone and
in your house with the smart
in my house, yeah. So yeah, I think it's just a matter of time where it happens to be outdoor as well.
Speaking of time, we're up. So thank you very much. There's lots more questions, so please find Farah outside, and she'll be happy to take those. But thank you very much. Thank you, Farah. So that takes us to the break. So 3 very interesting presentations. Thank you to our speakers so far. We're bang on time. We've got a 20-minute break with the refreshments right outside, some food as well. So please enjoy those. Please do come back after the break. We're going to kick off with a speech about the next billion users. In 2023, we're estimated to get to 8 billion users. And so we're looking forward to hearing that fascinating speech about that. So see you in 20 minutes. Thank you very much.
größte Gefahr für den Künstler ist sowieso, sich ernst zu nehmen. Und dann ist er kaputt.
Thank you. I was going to say lights, please, but we are there. It's always a good barometer for how we're doing to see how many people come back after the break, and I think we're about 98%, so that's really positive. Thank you very much. We're bang on time still, which is excellent. Welcome back everybody who is on the live stream as well. Thank you for staying with us, and I hope you also took a tea break. Without further ado, we've spoken a lot about how we reached 7 billion users. We're currently at 7.6, and it's expected in 2023 that we'll hit the 8 billion people on the planet, not users on the internet, people on the planet mark by 2023. So this is a very interesting and pertinent presentation. So please welcome me in joining Ian Turner to the stage. He's Solutions Architect at Google, and he's here to speak about the next billion users. Ian, the stage is yours.
Thanks, Luke. Hi, everybody. So just to demystify the role, so Solutions Architect pretty much means I work at Google to look at our clients' problems and the way they use our tech to make sure that we can make the most out of it, saving them money, and how they can build products on top of that. It's pretty much making money off the product, solutionizing these things. So let's look at the topic of next billion users. Now, earlier today, Luke took us back to 2009 and a bit of context setting. So I'm going to take you back a little bit further, back to 2005. So in 2005, London won the bid for the Olympic Games. There was also the bombings the next day. We had the outbreak of the bird flu pandemic. These two, Prime Minister and President, and also interesting, they were number 2 and 12 for Time People of the Year. The top grossing film was Revenge of the Sith, Darth Vader, and we saw the birth of Darth Vader in this film, and he was, interestingly enough, number 16 in Time's People of the Year. Top song was Mariah Carey with We Belong Together. She wasn't on the list of the top people of the year there. And Africa was only 2% online, right? So with a population just short of 1 billion people, around 900 million, 2% of that was online. To put that in context with Europe, Europe was sitting at 46% with a very similar population. So let's fast forward to today, and we're at a tipping point. We're at a tipping point where 50% of the population is going to go online. And that creeped up 2019. But obviously that's going to be spread between your developed and your developing economies. Developed economies are sitting at 82%. Looking at developing economies, that's only at 40%. And again, there's a wide spectrum of numbers there. To go back to our Africa example, 2% in 2005, that's up to 25% only now. Also pairing that with a steep population growth, they're at 1.2 billion. So comparing that to Europe, which has stayed relatively flat, there's a great opportunity of headroom for growth there. Now, if we look at where this growth can come from, you'll see this is a spread across Asia, or Southeast Asia, Africa, and South America. The large blue circles here are the population size, and the smaller dark blue is sort of the access to internet. So you can see the potential for growth in most of these is more than half of users coming online. But they have very different internet usage than the developed countries. The interaction with devices and specific habits for each country. So most importantly, they're mobile first and largely mobile only. Now, with the bulk of this market coming from Southeast Asia, India, Indonesia, there's staggering figures where 50% of the global mobile users come from Asia. Now, whilst each of these countries can seem slightly different, there's commonalities that we see across these next billion user markets. So one is they prefer voice. So voice usage and search, and this is across search, social, and texting. You get 30% of all searches made in India are used with voice. And we're also dealing with a partially illiterate population as well. So voice plays a big part in here. So the blend of language is quite fluid. You would have uneducated people in English will be basically using Hindi via speech or a Hindi keyboard. Maybe people who are educated in English might use Hinglish with their friends, Hindi with their parents in an English keyboard. And then there'll be also like shifts to localization where they would mix in Punjabi or Urdu, depending on where they live. Now, let's try something. So Okay. Okay, Google, play Badrinath Ki Dulhani. So that's another thing, is video content. Video content is huge there, much more popular than text. YouTube is one of the most popular apps in India, and certainly a big usage of their probably limited bandwidth of free data. Next is the demand for localized content. Engagement in local country, the demand for localized content is very high. There's 119 official languages across Africa and Asia, 314 million bilingual Indians. Also Hindi, it's the fourth most widely spoken language in the world, but it's less than 30 from internet content. And interesting about how this informs their purchasing habits. So a lot of purchases are made still within a very small radius to home, rather than similar to us where we buy from depots far away. Now, their engagement with mobile is extremely deep. So if you look at this guy here, this is probably the first computer he's ever owned, which is as powerful as a computer you could buy for £1,000 in 2000. It's the best camera he's ever owned. It's his home entertainment system. You're using YouTube at home to entertain himself. It's his business device, and also it's unprecedented choice, because the loyalty here is not to a brand, but rather to micro moments. But we face challenges here with lower spec phones, connectivity, cost, and the localized content. Now, recently I had the pleasure of seeing Tim Berners-Lee talk, and he was talking about with the World Wide Web Alliance for Affordable Internet, they're looking at making sure that 1 gigabyte of data equates to 2% of your salary. So there's a long way to go there, but that's the benchmark they're trying to set. Some countries fluctuate wildly on that. Now, tying this back to what Google does, if you look at Google's mission statement, which is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. I think the point you want to drive in here is universally. How do we get that content and bring it together? Now, what the 1 billion users, or the next billion users, also means for Google is that we currently have 1 billion users on these 7 products, which are, when they come back, is that Search, Maps, YouTube, Android, Chrome, Play, and Gmail. So it's how do we expand and adapt when these new users come online with very different behaviors. So one thing we've done is making localized content. So you see across Search, YouTube, Android, and Play, we've translated this to a plethora of languages behind it. Also making sure that the content is fast, relevant, and light to go back to the challenges we had. Here is the Lightbox feature where we're able to type in cricket. You can see you're getting very quick, very light, contextual information that matches the market. Also making sure that this works offline so that you can download it when you have Wi-Fi and then you can move outside of the house. And this is using with Maps offline and YouTube. Now, let's look at this in a product. So if we cue this video, so that's Google Maps with a two-wheeler direction mode, and that was launched in India. It's got huge, significant uptake. We're launching it in Indonesia, Southeast Asia, and Nigeria this year. Moving on from that, we've also got YouTube Go, which is built from the ground up with sort of an offline-first mentality, so that it's simple and approachable, and very importantly, it's like a respectable and predictable use of data usage. Also making sure that it surfaces social and relevant content. We then have the Google Assistant, which is fine-tuned for low memory devices. Again, making sure that locality is present in all the searches that happen, and the support of local languages. And then TES, which is an online direct payment where you don't have to actually manage a digital wallet, and it uses machine learning to protect the identity of the users. Now, I want to bring this all together and finish it off with one last video. And I think this sort of brings together the technology as an enabler, as well as the challenge. And I think when these users come online, the benefits it can have to their lives. So, cue the video.
मेरा नाम उर्मिला है, ईपी की रहने वाली हूँ। मेरे 3 बच्चे हैंगे, स्कूल में जाते हैं और बच्चों को होमवर्क नहीं करा सकते हैं, लेकिन चलो मेरे बच्चे होशियार हो गए, थोड़ा सा नेक पढ़ लिख जाते, कोई भी पढ़ा लिखा को काम भाव वो नहीं कर सकते हैं। बार बार कहने पड़ती है उन लोगन के कि मतलब थोड़ा सा बता दिए। मुझे पहली बार जैसे बच्चों को मतलब बार बार कविता नहीं आ रही थी, मतलब फोटो लाई।
1 कप सोयाबीन बहियों में 4 कप पानी डालकर उबालें।
तो इसने पढ़ के सुनाया है, और जैसे मतलब रिपोर्ट कार्ड आओ बच्चों को
अंग्रेजी, हिंदी, गणित, विज्ञान।
तो मुझे बहुत अच्छा लगा कि मतलब वो चीज़ है, मतलब जा चीज़ है। अब तो मैं खुद के लिए बहुत कुछ काम कर लेंगे।
चालू खाता, बचत खाता।
अब जैसे रेलवे के टिकट कटाना है तो मैं कटा सकती हूँ, किसी के सहारा नहीं लेने पड़ता है। एक तो इसमें बहुत बेहतर है।
I finished that exactly on 10 minutes. That's amazing. Cool. Thanks, everybody.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Shall we get back to there? Thank you very much, Ian. That was fascinating and actually inspiring to see how technology in that video example is changing people's lives for the better.
For sure.
Which is fascinating. We've got some good questions coming in. Please put your questions in on Slido, either here or if you're live streaming. One of the first ones that's come in is, how is Google tackling the challenge with the lack of internet infrastructure in some of these areas?
So I do know of a project called Google Station, which is pretty much, it's basically creating Wi-Fi hubs in areas. And I think in Nigeria, there's already 200 launched. Right. And it's pretty much giving pretty much fiber optic Wi-Fi quality into these hubs where people can go and use them. Places like stations will be able to launch them up so people can go into these zones, download the information they need, go offline, and then
like the YouTube Go example.
Yes.
So there is a question about YouTube actually, which is the YouTube offline example. Is that the premium product, or in these regions is that a free product? Do you know?
That's interesting. I questioned myself that because I'm not sure. I tried that when I was at home to see what feature it was, and it looked like I needed to go into premium. So whoever asked that question, I'll let you know.
Someone's asked a question about your profile picture. So where were you when you had that photograph taken?
It was a really cool breakfast bar in Bali, and I asked the person to take a picture. The bigger picture is amazing, with all this colour and fruit behind me, and the guy behind just totally photobombed.
He did, but it's a great picture. Will we see, going back to Farah's presentation about conversational AI and conversational ads, i.e. apps in ads, will we see voice-enabled conversational ads in the next billion user examples where people are actually people who are perhaps illiterate are actually talking into adverts on their phones?
Well, we have speech to text and text to speech the other way around.
Right.
Technology exists already, and it's contextual, and it's working against different languages. How that's been harnessed for ads yet? I mean, there's probably the innovations there. The space is open. I don't think we've reached that point yet.
Right. Well, you mentioned the 2%, Tim Berners-Lee, and the 2% of your income for your internet connectivity. Do you know what the current personal cost of data is?
Well, it fluctuates widely. I mean, I think they've focused on a few, I think like Ecuador, Mexico, there's a certain few countries where they've looked at it and they've worked with governments to get it to that point. But again, some places it goes up to, I think, Ivory Coast, possibly, don't quote me on that. I think it's up like by 40-50%. Right. So it does range quite wildly.
Right. And we're seeing, this is one of my questions, we're seeing Asia move into the 60-70% internet penetration range. I think we saw on some slides earlier and in yours as well. When do you think Africa will get to that level?
Well, you can see, I mean, the growth has been slow from 2005 to now, but I think the investment that's happening in there is clear. I mean, you see it across all the big tech companies, investment in there, investment in the infrastructure for internet, for affordable internet via. So everybody's coming together. It does seem like a focal point, and I think brands and companies would be silly not to focus on the huge opportunities that's there.
Absolutely. Final question. Is there an advertising opportunity with YouTube Download and Go, in your view?
I'm sure there is. I need a whiteboard to figure
work that out. Okay, there is one more. Why is voice, in your opinion, why isn't voice used in the UK and in the English language as much as it is elsewhere?
It was weird. My wife was, I presented this last night to my wife, and she's from South America, and she was saying, she's been in England for a long time, so she almost seems English, and she gets irritated by her family using the phone to talk on it, because everybody sends messages and they get the ads, and I think it's probably just a cultural thing.
Right.
America is very high on voice search as well, but I think it's probably a cultural thing there.
Very good. All right, there is one last question. You got an amazing pair of trainers. Is this the thing? There was a comment about Damien's trainers earlier. I withheld that one. Ian, thank you very much. Absolute pleasure. Thank you. Cheers. Fascinating presentation, I think you'll agree. So we've spoken about the change that occurred over the last 10 years, and Damien made the statement that actually the next 10 years will probably see more change than the last 50 years in total. So change requires management, both for ourselves and for our organizations. So our next speaker couldn't be more perfectly timed. She's the Global Senior Online Marketing Manager at Siemens. She's here to talk about change your mindset. So please welcome to the stage, Paulina Jamsa. Thank you.
Hi, so how is everyone? Everyone's good? Been good event so far? Awesome. So I'm Paulina Jamsa. I'm Global Senior Online Marketing Manager at Siemens. Very fancy title, of course. Yes, so I will be talking to you about changing your mindset and the customer experiences in digital. There's a little twist there, but you will see that. So what do I actually do? Well, first of all, I'm from Finland. That's where the accent is coming from. I live in London, and my team and management are in Germany. I am changing mindsets from traditional marketing to digital marketing across 90 different countries around the world. Also, we are changing mindsets from traditional project management to agile. And I'm showing, for example, I'm running an agile project just to understand how it really is, so I can actually know what I'm talking about. Now, you can you can connect with me in LinkedIn if you want to. I'm on YouTube as well. If you want to follow me, I'll be going towards King's Cross Station after this conference. If you really want to use a hashtag, you can use hashtag awesome, because I am, you know. So I'll talk about customer experiences in digital and how emotional intelligence is playing a crucial part of this. But before I start, let us address the elephant in the room. You must be all thinking, why the hell is someone from Finland talking about emotional intelligence, right? I mean, it's not like we are very expressive people, right? You guys know Kimi Räikkönen from Formula 1, the Iceman. Yeah, he's actually really expressive to be a Finn, you know? When he won the World Championship, he looked like this. Outrageous, right? They were children watching, yeah. Also, we're not really polite either. In fact, the word please doesn't even exist in Finnish. Why? Because it's useless. But I guess that's why Oliver Twist was never really a big hit in Finland, you know. Please, sir, can I have some more translating Finnish to soup? But yeah, I have to say that now with the new technology, right, we're getting much better in our expressions, happy, sad. This presentation is great. Now, in fact, yeah, people give us the technology, but does it really affect us that much, you know? It's not about expressions, it's all about the heart, actually. It's all about the heart. And I have to say that about 20 years ago, I would have 100% agreed that I have absolutely no emotional intelligence. I'm from a small town in Lapland. I was bullied as a kid. I was told I was worth nothing. I was useless, ugly, horrible, and the only thing I had was grades. I had no friends and anything. In fact, I was so socially anxious that I had to ask my parents or my brother to order for me in a restaurant because I was afraid I would say something stupid. Then when I was 17, I decided to change. And yeah, I've now lived in 5 different countries. I speak 7 languages. I worked in agencies, startups, SAP, Microsoft, now Siemens. So screw you guys. So how did I do that? Well, I was using emotional intelligence. And in fact, there was the moment when I was 17 when I realized that what I thought was my biggest weakness was my biggest strength, and that was actually having a heart. Okay? So if you're using emotional intelligence, you can achieve much more than you can ever imagine. So why is it your secret weapon in the next 10 years? Because technical. Everyone is so focused on technology that they forget what really matters, and that's people. Because it's not about the coolest technology, it's how you make people feel. What do you do with that technology to increase that experience to the next level, right? And also, how do you help them to share those feelings with the world? That's where the power is coming from. And with so much fakeness in the world, all the fake news and so on, people don't really know what to trust. They really don't know what to trust, and they want to experience something real. So, you know, if I didn't film it and post it on social, it never happened. That's already past, because right now, if I didn't film it, appear in it and post it on social, it never happened. That's the selfie generation, but people, they want to share their feelings, experiences, and feel like they are alive. And that's where we can use technology. So, what to focus on in the next 10 years in experience? Digital employee experience, that's number 1. Now, I don't know about you, but in some companies where I've been or which I visit, I don't know why employees are forced to be using technology like those legacy systems that are complex and annoying. And then when you're using your mobile or your own laptop, the experience is wonderful, right? So why are you forcing employees to go through that? Because the fact is, the companies, they need more talent than the talent needs them. Now with I'm from the Nokia generation, right? I'm Nokia generation. I used to believe in job stability. I don't believe in that anymore. I saw digital crashing my world pretty much. However, the digital has given us the power to work from anywhere when we want to, whenever we want to. We can have financial freedom, you know, we're not limited by borders. And this is something that corporates have to remember. People don't have to, that top talent doesn't have to work for you. You know? So you really have to take it in account. You have to treat them well. I'm loving this button. See, so people, they value more flexibility, freedom, and culture than money and status. Hashtag digital nomads, right? We saw the presentation of globalization, how the new generations right now, new countries are starting to use all this digital technology, right? Talent can be in those countries, and you really need to give people freedom to work from wherever they want to. You have to give them freedom to work from home in the middle of India if they want to, because family is important for them. You can't force people to be in the offices anymore if they don't want to. Also, people tend to leave people, not companies. I think all of you knows that one manager or one colleague that drove you crazy or has driven someone crazy, and you left the company because of that person, not because of the company itself, the person. So you really need to look into the company culture. How is the person's experience when they actually come to work, when they speak with the colleagues? You really need to make sure that you're not just giving them bean bags and ping pong tables, you know. Fun at work, it's actually mutual respect, right? Because you can bounce off ideas with your colleagues and laugh with them, and you feel appreciated. That's real fun at work, and not just playing ping pong. Second, digital customer experience for older customers. I don't classify myself yet in that category. I'm close, but not yet. Because you shouldn't ever ignore the silver foxes, because they can bridge the generation gap. Why I'm talking about this, we will have more and more older people who are not so used to digital technology than we are, or the younger generations, right? This gap is becoming bigger and bigger. So you need those people in your team who understands where those guys are coming from. Digital after purchase experience. I get a lot of pitches from UX, and usually the UX stops when the person clicks the button and buys the product. But why do you think Amazon is killing it so well? Because they focus on what happens after the person clicks the button, right? So they know that they have all these systems in place that you can get it delivered very quickly, and the experience is amazing. So you are competing against the last best experience. You have to focus on UX after the purchase. And last one, give a damn. Because show that you care, because it's clear when you don't. I mean, you guys see this all the time, Vogue washing. It used to be greenwashing, now it's Vogue washing. You can see when the company doesn't really care about the environment or the people or the culture. It's very clear when it's just in terms to make a sale, and it's not really to make a difference in the world. So when you're doing campaigns and everything, think about the purpose, think about the reason why you're doing it, and how that's going to do something good in the world. Thank you. That was me. And
thank you, Pauliina. Very interesting and very entertaining as well. There's a couple of good questions that have come in, but the first is, great presentation. Will Kimi ever win again?
Kimi wins in life. Let's put it that way.
Very good. Okay, what's the worst legacy system that you've come across in your career?
It was built by the company themselves, because they didn't trust experts to do it. You know, the typical attitude, it's cheaper if we do it ourselves, and then they didn't realize that then afterwards you need to update the system. So
and what's the best
it was
one?
very painful. Best one that I've come across, I have to say Jira and Confluence. I love that in the Agile project management. Jira.
Jira, very good. Okay. You spoke about people, and you don't leave the company, you leave the person.
Yes.
Who's the person that you most aspire to work for?
Who I aspire to work for?
Why?
Elon Musk.
Why?
Because I think he has a higher purpose and he's really inspiring, and I love that he has crashed down and he just keeps getting back up and he doesn't give up. And even if his heroes don't believe in him, you know, when the astronauts were telling that what he's doing is not good, I think it was amazing that he still did it.
Very inspiring. And on that note, we're out of time.
All right.
So thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're very entertaining indeed. Thank you, Paulina. So, we're looking ahead to, and while I'm talking, the chairs are going to come up on stage. We're looking ahead to the next decade, but actually we've got a very important quarter right ahead of us, starting in just a couple of days, Q4. And so we put it together, a panel that are going to come up on stage and talk about Q4 strategies, both for now, but also for every Q4 into the next decade. A brilliant panel. It's going to be very entertaining. They're not all going to agree, I'm sure, and I'm encouraging them not to. So I want to welcome to the stage, please join me as well, Alice Malthouse, who's Senior Account Manager at NMPI. Davis, up you come, Alice. David Madison, Associate Director, Retail Leisure Sector at HSBC. Derek Freer, Managing Director at WebGains. And Simon Boyce, Head of Digital Performance at Love Honey. Round of applause for our panel, please. So the first thing is, you're not going to get comfortable on these seats, are you? We're going to keep you on your toes with these. So we've heard a lot about change over the last 10 years and some change that's coming in the next 10 years. We'll work down the panel and then back up a little bit. What do you think, Alice, we'll start with you if you don't mind. The question's just disappeared, but what do you think is going to be the big consumer trends affecting marketing both now and into the future?
So I think some of the others are going to talk about Amazon, but one thing I want to talk about is video, which I know Ian mentioned earlier. So a lot of people are changing the way that they consume media, and lots of people are going to YouTube, even to look at reviews. So I was on holiday earlier this year, and someone was on in the hotel that I was, filming around the hotel so they could put it on YouTube, and so people could look at kind of reviews there. So I think that's that's one place where we need to make sure that we're appearing on is YouTube, and Google have recognised this and released lots of new formats as well. So that would be mine.
Very good. So you've all conferred on this question before, I understand. Right? Okay.
I personally say, not my area of expertise, but Instagram. Instagram's where it's at. The gram, doing it for the gram. Insta checkout, which I know is live in the US, it's not live in the UK yet, but we see that as transformational. It's another channel for retailers to utilise and dominate. And
so being able to purchase within Instagram?
Yes, if you don't push on Instagram, push to a third-party website, 50% drop off straight away. So to be able to go straight through, I think, will be transformational, in my opinion.
Right. When do you think we'll see that here?
Well, the last update was in March.
Right.
So we'll see, but I know Burberry and Gymshark are currently using it in the US.
Yeah.
So hopefully it's only a matter of time before it hits the UK.
Right. Derek,
So we've covered video and we've covered imagery, so what's left? I think from my perspective, I'm seeing consumers going back to basics. From quite a, even over the past few years, we've seen so many changes and so many different things, and I think people can be getting a little bit confused about everything that's going on and all the different options that they have. I think we're going to see consumers taking on what's going on with the likes of Amazon and Google as well, ordering by voice. But to be honest, it wouldn't surprise me. Marketing's cyclical. We've seen this over and over again, and I just see consumers going back to basics.
Mm-hmm. Simon.
And then for me, I think one of the big changes that we've seen, particularly in recent years, in large part because of the rise of marketplaces, is a change in customer loyalty. And so where it used to be that customers would have the brands that they would always be going to, they would repeat purchase time and time again. We certainly see that starting to fragment now. People are a lot more price conscious, but also a lot more proposition conscious. You know, Amazon has same-day delivery in some places. So I think it requires retailers particularly, but all brands, to really start thinking a lot more about who they're talking to and how they can lure them back.
even 2-hour delivery in some examples.
Yeah, absolutely.
Some places. There was a question asked earlier on, which was, is acquisition or retention more important? What's your view on that, Simon?
It is not one or the other. I think it's interesting. Lovehoney restructured earlier this year and created 2 roles, one of which was a new head of acquisition, one of which was a new head of retention.
Right, okay.
So they were seen as an equal footing, equal importance, and both needing a focus this year.
Absolutely. Okay.
Is that a cop-out?
No, that's a good answer. Does anyone disagree with that?
I mean, I look at even our internal team and I see how many salespeople we have in comparison to how many services we have when we're looking at B2B. and so therefore, I'm always going to lean on the side of retention. I think if you've got people that you know are always going to be there for you, it at least sets the standard. And then you can look at getting the new guys on board after that to improve things.
David, do you see any trends or companies doing it particularly well one way or the other?
Not specifically in that much detail, to be honest, but I think retention is key, especially during this phase of the cycle. You need to retain your customers, look after your customers, and then anything above that is a bonus, is the way that we're seeing it at the minute.
Alice, what techniques are you seeing being effective in promoting retention, particularly in the Q4 period, perhaps customers who purchased last year?
Yeah, I think all of your first-party data is obviously really important, and especially building awareness of your brand in the lead up to Q4. And then once these users have been exposed to your ad or clicked on your ad and gone to site, you can then start creating audiences of these users so that you can contact them again later on and show them your offers for Q4.
So, David, we can't get away from Brexit. Some people may have seen the discussions yesterday, which were, let's say, interesting. HSBC, no doubt, have got lots of internal communications on Brexit. What do you think the effect of Brexit is going to be on Q4, if any?
It's already had a detrimental impact. Like, you look at March, that didn't happen. Retailers stocked up, spent a lot of money stocking up, and that didn't happen, and then had to try and get rid of all that stock. And if consumers didn't want that stock, you had to discount that stock. So you're not only trying to get rid of it, you're discounting it, diminishing the value of your brand almost at the same time, and then the same thing's happening again. And we see it from the financial perspective where it's causing distress. Like, you're using liquidity that you don't have to use. And the strongest operators with the strongest balance sheets are the ones that are going to survive this period, and there's going to be fallout. It's just, this is possibly the worst time to have, like 31st of October, who would have thought it? Halloween. For food retailers, especially perishable goods, it's just the worst possible timing, and I think it's going to have a major impact.
Do you think it had an impact on Thomas Cook?
Say again?
Do you think it had an impact for Thomas Cook?
Yeah, no, definitely. The travel and leisure industry definitely was impacted by Brexit, people putting off and booking last minute. And yeah, people are booking last minute at a discount, and that's impacting margins again and liquidity, etc. So it's all having an impact.
I'll come back to that topic, but what can, open question really for the panel, what can advertisers do, businesses do to mitigate the Brexit effect that David's just spoken about?
So I think for us, it's a principle of kind of transparency, and I run the risk of now sounding like everybody on the news that I shout at every night when they drop the word uncertainty in there. But yeah, by very definition, uncertainty makes it very difficult for us to plan precisely what we're going to do. What we have agreed, though, is that we're going to maintain an open, sort of honest, transparent, frank communication with customers. You know, if deliveries are hampered by a couple of days, we'll surface that on the homepage. We will manage that expectation. If we struggle to get a product in at the time that we were expecting to launch it, then we will be quite open about that. I think that as much as anything, it's just sort of trying to consider our customers as grown up enough to sort of sympathise with us on this. You know, it's not something that businesses have done to people. It's not something people have done to businesses. We're kind of on the same side of this one. So I think for me, the key is open communication.
Consumers aren't stupid. You know, if they've watched the news at any point over the past 3 years or read a newspaper at any point in the past 3 years, they'll know that this is happening. And I think people are appreciating through the various warnings that have come out that there may well be elements of delays or issues, and that honesty and transparency is something that's going to be able to get you through that. But I also don't think that advertisers are going through the same process as they did in March, because in March they've had it, they've seen it, it didn't happen. And what advertisers these days don't want to do is have to try and juggle the stock issues around Brexit, the stock issues around Q4, Christmas, and then moving into the new year as well. So I think with the way things have gone, a lot of people are approaching this as a the boy that cried wolf for the second, the third, the fourth time. And I think not necessarily the impact on the businesses, but the actions that are being taken are reducing every single time this happens. And I think that's actually more dangerous than anything.
Yeah, yeah. With this in mind, and talking about discounting earlier on as you did, David, and again, an open question, should brands be engaging in Black Friday this year?
Yes.
David, go ahead. Yeah, Alice, yes.
Who wants it?
Can brands afford not to? I mean, I won't lie, in an ideal world, I would have nothing to do with Black Friday. If I could avoid it, I would. The simple fact is I work in a sector where all of my competitors are doing it.
Yep.
They're all planning to ramp up their activity, strengthen their offers, and trade margin for volume at that time of year. So for me, it's one of those that it means you're duty bound to do so. If I had the good fortune to be alone in my sector and, I had no competition, there was no alternative, then no, I would prefer not to. Right. The honest answer.
Yep.
No, I agree with what Simon's saying. If you're not doing it, then your competitors probably are. But you don't necessarily have to make a new Black Friday deal. We see some of our clients just repackaging their existing sales as a Black Friday offer, so people think they're getting a good deal. But people are still in the mindset to convert at that time, so you need to be there for your consumers.
David?
Yeah, no, I have to agree. You have to be in it to win it. Yeah. And we did some research last year where I tracked 80 websites, looking at when they went on sale, when they didn't go on sale. And the week before Black Friday, out of those 80, probably I think 65-70% of those were already on sale. Some kind of discounting strategy or whatever. Then over the weekend that went up to 85%, and then the week after on Cyber Monday a week that went down to 45%. But it's a 2-week period of discounting. And I think going back to saying consumers, I don't think they get the credit that they deserve, because I know you're saying repackaged sales strategies from previous. The consumer knows that they're getting a good deal generally. I know if I'm getting a good deal. I know that for a fact. So I think making sure you've got a clear strategy and the consumer knows that they're getting a good deal. Like a good example of that, Selfridges, who have a one day literally on off. They go on sale on the Friday, go off on the Saturday. Clear strategy, absolutely nails it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, it's don't concentrate too much on what your competitors are doing, because that will just lead to this race to the bottom that everybody's worried about when it comes to Black Friday, and that one person reduces their prices by 10, so the next guy does it 12, then 15, and it gets worse and worse. Concentrate on your own situation. Concentrate on what you can afford to give away. You don't want to be losing money over that period just to gain interest. But there's no copy and paste solution in this. It's all dependent on what your margins are, what you're looking to achieve from it. And remember, you've still got December and January still to come. So it's it's very much specific to what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
So I was just going to add one more thing. Saying most good retailers have already planned Black Friday just after the last Black Friday. Having a clear strategy, again, having bought the products where you know you can squeeze the margin on it. I don't think everybody knows that, but you should be doing that, whereas previously it was a knee-jerk reaction like that, and knee-jerk reaction kills your margin and kills your business eventually.
I think the point I made earlier on when we were talking together was that Black Friday for us should be one of the quietest days of the year. From the services side of things, because unless you're in warehousing, where you're definitely going to be busy, you should have all this planned out well in advance. Black Friday should be a case of dealing with any last-second issues and hopefully seeing the pound or dollar signs appearing on your reporting.
I do think, though, that there's a real value in having the courage of your convictions over a key trading period, whether it's Black Friday, Christmas, whichever one it is. Because typically, if you've been planning all year a specific event, you've modelled all of your margins around those products, you've got this plan, and all of a sudden you realise your competitors are shouting 12% off where you were only 11% off, that's okay. Your plan was a good plan all year round. It remains a good plan. And as Derek says, if you don't hit quite what you wanted on Black Friday, well, then you've got December. And if you don't do it in December, you've got January. There is always another opportunity. I think it's so easy to obsess around that one weekend, albeit now a 5-day weekend or indeed a 2-week weekend. But there's the other 50 weeks of the year still.
I think that's a point about consumers as well, is that consumers are beginning to realise this as well. It's not all about Black Friday. It's almost, again, going back to my earlier point of things being cyclical, it used to be the Christmas period was the big period. I think last year we saw some areas of this industry dip a little bit over the Black Friday period and then actually increase again over Christmas. So there is much more there, and I think consumers are appreciating that they're not going to spend all their money on Black Friday now. There's more time to do it and possibly better deals coming up later in the year.
Yeah.
I think another interesting fact as well, alluding to some of the presentations we saw earlier about just the rise of internet connectivity across the world. Black Friday is not the largest retail day of the year.
Yeah. Right.
Singles Day is the largest retail day of the year. And I think that it's all too easy to obsess in a sort of a Eurocentric Black Friday obsession. And certainly if you're a global brand, there's a whole other event out there that's considerably larger.
Yeah. And is anyone on the panel taking advantage of Singles Day or have done?
This year is the first year that this sort of realisation has dawned.
Yeah.
So what we're going to try and do this year is some test and learn activity particularly. So try through a few different channels, few different mechanics. We're the first to hold our hands up and say it's something we've not done before.
Right.
But we certainly believe that what we do this year should then immediately inform our strategy for next year.
Yeah.
Certainly something big from our side. We've got a lot of advertisers that are either based in China or have, they're looking for Chinese consumers within the UK and with the EU, and it's become a big deal for them as well. But looking solely UK, it's nowhere near the same size that we're at yet. But we've seen increases year on year, and fully expect that to continue. As has been alluded to earlier on in the day, the way things are going, things are moving east. So what's happening east is then going to move west, and this is going to become a big deal for us moving forward.
Yeah, quite a few of our clients at NMPI are also trying to push ads out at Singles Day, but I don't think enough focus is made on it at the moment. So I think over the years there'll be much more of a focus and much more planning towards Singles Day.
Yeah. David, are you seeing any brands doing really well in relation to Singles Day?
I'd have to defer to my Asia Pac colleagues, to be honest.
Okay.
Now, from the UK perspective, obviously the luxury brands get involved, but
yeah.
UK retail generally, it's not big.
So predominantly luxury
many
brands.
of my radar.
Yeah. Derek, there's a question here with your name on it. Can you tell us more about what you mean when you say going back to basics earlier on, if you can remember?
Thanks for pulling me up on that, whoever that was. I really appreciate that one. Yeah.
You're welcome. So more here for you as well. So.
Brilliant. I can't wait. How long's got? Right, okay. how can I expand this answer out? So when I think going back to basics, I think people are looking for a single place to go and get things. So you look back 20, 30 years ago, people wanted to go to an Argos, or people wanted to go to a big Asda and go and pick things up. So it alludes more to the wanting a single place that they can go and buy whatever it is that they need to achieve, and not just through Amazon, but through the likes of what NMPI and what competitors are doing when it comes to the CSS space and Google as well. I think people are more interested in just finding things in one particular position and taking it from there, rather than putting the effort into to put a huge amount of effort into going through loads of different sites to find it.
Good. I'm going to stay with you, actually.
Brilliant.
Because there was another one which I saw, which is, where is it?
Where's your barber?
Huh? Where's your barber jacket?
What have you been seeing for the past 20 minutes?
I've lost the question. We're a couple of days away from, I've lost your question. We're a couple of days away from Q4. When should brands be thinking about and enacting on their strategies for Q4? Alice?
Planning or actually pushing them out?
Both of those things.
In terms of planning, most of our clients have had their Q4 meetings already, and that's just because so many teams need to be involved. Right. So I know Farah was talking about the conversationalist ads earlier. If that's something that you were looking to test, you can't roll this out late. You need to plan for it really early because so many teams are involved. As well, maybe for Black Friday, you might introduce a microsite. And then you'll need to make sure that you've got all the tracking in place for that as well. So you need to make sure that you're planning as soon as possible and then starting to roll things out in the next few weeks, really, just to make sure you're building brand awareness for Q4.
Just have to agree, planning should have already happened, and your buying's already been done, it's already been stocked, it's already coming into the UK, so if you haven't done it, you're far too late.
But you need it before the 31st
Yeah,
of October.
Exactly, and your strategy should be well planned, but yeah, Black Friday, etc., you got Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, Boxing Day, and all that. But one thing that we see more and more now with the digital kind of age in the UK is that one stock single solution, making sure you can actually fulfill that demand on Black Friday, whereas if you've got 12 million, 15 million quid's worth of demand and not being able to fulfill that because you don't know where your stock is, it's one thing we see our clients now doing more and more, investing in the software infrastructure to make sure they can meet demand.
I'm going to change track on a question here. So we talked about hitting 7 billion people on the planet, 8 billion, and of course the environment is a hot topic, as it rightly should be, and there wasn't a pun intended there. The question here is, how do you see the drive for more sustainable, ecologically friendly products and business practices changing Q4 strategies?
Do you want to take that, Simon?
Happy to do so. Yeah, I mean, I certainly think that environmentalism is a growing consumer demand. So, in that same spirit of fostering loyalty, I think the brands that do a bad job run the risk of hemorrhaging their customers that much faster. It's certainly inexcusable not to be working towards plastic-free packaging now. Those of us, or those of you, more accurately, who are in a sector where your products can be recycled, obviously, it's incumbent upon us to be doing this. Love Honey have to take a slightly different tack. Because a lot of the products that we sell are of a medical grade silicon, you're not permitted to recycle it.
Right.
So we're actually starting lobbying activities now. So we actually feel that business should be a driving force behind this. So it's something that we actually want to try to pioneer rather than be forced to react to. Because actually, when you're told to do something, if you don't do it fast enough, the PR fallout is significant and rapid.
Yeah.
I think from my perspective, it's all about the Greta Thunberg generation now, and you see what's happening there and what's happening with the school kids just now striking. I wish I had thought of that when I was at school. Good idea. But from our perspective, we are using it within marketing as a tool because it's becoming really important, and one of the top ways to engage with these people, with these guys that are finding this more important to them as they go about their lives. So having the stamp on your site or on your marketing saying that this is something, we've been shown by a professional body that this is something that means something to us, having an environmental policy that you can rely on, and not being afraid to use that in your marketing materials. I think that the last speaker said something that people can tell when it was wake washing, I think it was. People can tell when you're saying something for the sake of saying it, but people can tell when you're being realistic about it, and having the actual data on site to show you're being realistic about it and having it available for people to view is a really big thing now.
So I was going to say, at least it's on the agenda now. For every retailer, it's on the agenda. It wasn't previously, but the thing that's going to drive it most is you guys, us, consumers. Until people are willing to pay that extra 5-10% for something that's sustainably sourced, it's not going to happen as fast as we want it to. So I think as soon as the consumers can do that, will do that, the change will happen quicker, but we're not there yet. Even though people talk about it, we're not quite there. We're not seeing it. Although your ASOS, your Boohoo's are starting to drive that change, particularly ASOS, Boohoo less so, but they are getting into it a little bit better. Yeah.
Alice?
No, I think it's definitely a way to stand out from your competitors, similar to what Derek was saying. You should definitely use it in your marketing materials to stand out from other people. And this, again, is something that our clients do. It's a way, if not going to this person, then come to us because we're doing this sustainably. So it's definitely something to use.
Final question, quick fire one. What was the last thing that you purchased that was influenced directly by marketing? And the panel.
A book, because an influencer was reading it on Instagram.
On Instagram, okay.
I'm ashamed. Amazon Echo.
Really? Amazon. How were you influenced by it?
All the adverts on British Bake Off.
The last meeting I had was with Love Honey, so I'm not going to say. But no, in all seriousness, from a marketing perspective, it was something that I bought having seen an advert on the underground. So me being a traditionalist, that was it, and it was actually the services of an estate agent. So the first one was more exciting than talking about an estate agent.
And I honestly can't remember the specific product, but I guarantee it would have been because Amazon said that people who bought this thing you actually wanted also bought this thing that you possibly don't. But I am a sucker for the associated.
Right, and that was it. Well, thank you very much, panel. That was very interesting and entertaining. Please welcome in, thanking our panel for that.
Cheers.
Thank you very much. Don't worry about the chairs. Fantastic. Really appreciate all the panelists who've come up and joined us today. Please come up and take the chairs. Thank you very much. So we're on the final presentation now. We'll wait one moment. I hope you're all sitting comfortably. Thank you very much. You can leave one of those.
Do you want one stop?
Yeah, leave those two. No? Okay, take those with you. Thank you very much. Smooth. So So the serious business is done, and I hope you found all of that interesting and informative and useful, and that you can take some actions away from today. We're on our final speaker, and we always like to have a really inspirational finish to the day. And I really think that we've got a superb and very inspirational speaker for all of you to sit back and enjoy. It's an absolute pleasure to have him with us. He's the co-founder and CEO of Bremont Watch Company. His name is Nick English, and please welcome him to the stage to tell you about his fascinating and inspiring story. Nick, the stage is yours. Thank you.
Acutely aware of how actually much that soundtrack sounds like Pirates of the Caribbean when you've heard it a couple of times. I haven't got a clicker. Can I grab a clicker? Oh, perfect, perfect. Thank you very much. And also acutely aware of the fact that I'm probably the only one in the room wearing a mechanical watch, because you're all very new media, aren't you? So does anyone have a mechanical watch in the audience? Oh, there's a few, that's good. They're very eco-friendly. iWatch, obviously, you've probably been every sort of 2 years or so, but a mechanical watch should theoretically last forever if you have it serviced. So that's the benefit. What I thought I'd talk to you a little bit today is, it's very much about building a brand. We started Bremont back in 2002, and it's a little bit about the journey, how we got there, how we started, and indeed sort of any questions afterwards. But it started actually much further back than 2002. This chap here was our father. So I co-founded the business with my brother Giles, who's a couple of years younger than me. And this chap here is our father. We spent a huge amount of time as we grew up in the workshop with him. He's an incredible aeronautical engineer, Cambridge, where he read, we did a PhD there, 6 years there. But he was so curious about all things mechanical. So we spent the whole time restoring old motorbikes, planes, cars. One of the things he was very passionate about was clocks, and that's where our interest became in all things mechanical. So you have anything that you could tinker with in the workshop, that was us. The other big passion, which definitely came down through him, was flying. So all three of us were sponsored at university by the Air Force. He did a lot of display flying, and as we grew up, we were lucky enough to a bit of display flying as well. So in our teens would go off and, well, actually, when we're this young size, we'd sit in the back of an airplane like that so nobody could see us, and we'd do the air shows without the Civil Aviation Authority seeing us. As we grew up a bit, we started doing them ourselves. And then our lives changed quite a lot in 1995. I hadn't flown my father for a long, long time, probably a year or so. And it was one beautiful sort of March day, and he said, look, why don't we go for a fly? My brother had gone up to the airfield early that day, and we're off to do some sort of formation practice, similar to the sort of pitch you see there. And sort of things didn't go as planned that day, and we had an accident. And the tipping point for us, and our father died. I was in the sort of front seat there. I ended up breaking 30-odd bones and going into hospital for many, many months. And my brother was sort of flying beside, saw the whole thing sort of happen and heard it on the radio and stuff, which was pretty horrific. So I'm actually half metal now. I've got a lot of metal bits inside me. So going through airport security is always a bit of a bummer. But it was for us, it was that tipping point. And you know, I think it changes. When an event like that happens, it does change the way you think about things. So for my sins, after I left university, I always thought I was going to join the Air Force. And it was, I remember asking my father, you know, what should I do? And actually, if you join the Air Force in the early 90s, I'm giving my age now, early 90s, it was a 3 or 4 year waiting list before you learned to fly. And I was very impatient. And I said, okay, I'm going to go and do something different. So I went into the city. Giles and I both went into corporate finance. And I remember sitting down, I'd had the accident, and about a year later, I was sitting down, and I'd just been working all night, as you do in the city. And my boss, who was 10 years older than me, sort of about 20 stone, you know, sweating profusely, on his third wife, you know, extra big mortgage, that sort of thing, came in, and he said, Nick, you're doing a bloody good job here. In 10 years' time, you could be where I am. And I remember just looking at this guy going, so I rang up my brother and I said, Giles, I'm thinking of quitting. And he rang me back 10 minutes later and said, I've quit. So the next problem there was, oh my gosh, what am I going to tell my mother? And we left. And there he is. And we got involved in a business restoring aircraft for a while. And it was a bit like therapy. It was maintaining and restoring these old wartime aircraft, which is a big passion of ours. And it helped us, I suppose, diffuse the whole and understand exactly what had gone on in the years beforehand. But the back of this was this huge passion for watches. So I don't know if anyone's into mechanical watches quite as much as I am, but there is this amazing history of watchmaking in this country. So if you go back 100-odd years, turn of last century, 60%, because you think of Switzerland, don't you? Everyone thinks of Switzerland when you think of watches, but the world sets its time by Greenwich. If you go back, let me say, to the 1700s, first ship's chronometer was built by a Yorkshireman, a carpenter Yorkshireman, who won this incredible competition set by the British Admiralty, where he would go off and work out a solution for telling the time at sea. You could tell, latitude using stars or sun, but longitude you needed time. And John Harrison was the chap who came up with that. But 120 years ago, 60% of the world's pocket watches and clocks came from, this country, Clerkenwell and places like that. So there is this incredible activity that happened on these British shores. And then what happened is, I guess you had 2 world wars. So if you could build a movement part, that's the sort of part inside the watch, you could probably build machine anything out of metal. So you're pulled into all sorts of different industries, from planes, guns. You could build a firing pin for an Enfield rifle, whatever it was. And the industry gradually shrunk. And then, obviously, as the interwar years, there was depression and so forth. And then with the Second World War, when it really was all hands on deck. And during this time, Switzerland remained remarkably independent and sold watches to everyone, which sort of helped destroy us. So the last company, I guess, in this country to make watches, mechanical watches, was probably Smiths in the 1960s. And then they have finally died out with the quartz revolution. But you're machining parts. So a big part of what Bremon's very much about is bringing back watchmaking to this UK. That is our passion. That's our number one. Hopefully, you talk to anyone at Brembo and say, what are you about? And you'd cut them in half. It'd be like a stick of rocket and say, we make watches in the UK. And this is, there's a lot of easier places to make watch parts, a lot cheaper places to make watch parts. But this is our sort of our number one mission. And this is the new place we're building now, which is just outside Henley. So we've got 2 facilities at the moment. So if you go to Henley, you'll see this at the moment. We're not quite there. This is supposed to be ready July next year. But if you're machining parts so human hair is 50, 60 microns. You're machining to probably 3 or 4 microns consistently. So you have a machine probably quarter the size of this room, doing nothing but making a part, a minute part. The in-house movement, everyone talks about Swiss movements. So we've been working for several years, the in-house movement in the UK, which again is a big passion of ours, working with an incredible chap, a British chap who is world-renowned. And this will be a big turning point for us. But a lot of it comes down to training. Where do you find watchmakers in the UK? It's kind of next to impossible. So obviously, we pinched a few from people to begin with, as you do. But that was many, many years ago. And since then, the last decade, it's all about training up. So if you want to be a watchmaker in the UK, you'll come to Bremont and you will generally sit down. You'll do a bit of apprenticeship. So we're all very much into apprenticeships. I'd love to see the sort of polys and the universities and the polys go back to doing more vocational stuff because it's so important. And we're missing engineers. We're missing technicians. We're missing people who want to make a career out of things like watchmaking. And we work with some incredible organizations like the Advanced Manufacturing Research Centre. If any of you should go up to Sheffield to go and have a look, it's the most phenomenal setup. Twinned with a university, and I mean, it's a great statistic. 15 years ago, it's the cheapest real estate, industrial real estate in Europe, just on the slag heaps of where the old coal mines were in Sheffield. Now it's the most expensive. You've got Rolls-Royce jet engines, you've got Jaguar, you've got McLaren, you've got Boeing was a founding partner. It is an incredible one. You've got 400 PhD and apprentices up there, all from the UK. Then you've got little things like British School of Watchmaking, which is tiny, and we sort of help subsidise that. But we're hoping that with time this will change. So when we started Bremont, it was very much we weren't Swiss. We so weren't Swiss, and there were several. Giles and I started. There were 730 odd Swiss watch brands when we started, and very few British. There's a couple of very special artisanal watchmakers making 10 watches a year. But what we wanted to do is something fairly different. So authenticity was key. So when we started the brand, we didn't want to buy a brand. It was very much, let's start Bremont from scratch. We wanted to produce something which was beautifully engineered, so the product would stand on its own 2 feet, which is you've got to have a product that works. Obviously, you can try and build the best brand in the world, but if you don't have a good product to start with, you're kind of on a hiding to nothing. But we didn't want to trade on someone else's history. I showed you that list of brands beforehand, which incredible. Harrison's brand was available when we started, and that would have been amazing to have. But at the same time, it wasn't us. It wasn't our history. And I think you've got to create your own history if you're starting from scratch. So we see ourselves competing with ourselves in a way. We're trying to, obviously Switzerland's out there, but our offering is very, very different. We're not trying to say we're a Swiss watch. We're a British watch, and that does make a difference. The whole bit about doing things differently was very, very important to us from very early on. So our strategy, Giles and I, we sat down and we said, what is our, attitude to investment, for example? So when we, Giles and I set up, there's 2 ways of looking at investment in anything you do. Machinery, you can sit down, you can do your incredible return on investment model where you think, okay, is this going to work? What's the payback on this? Or you can just say, actually, let's just have a go. And what are the downside? What is the downside of doing it? So my brother and I set up this thing we got the nickname from a mate of ours called the Fuck It Fund, where you just put money in and without the board knowing, and we'd try stuff. And if it worked, we'd come up and say, yeah, we thought about this a lot, and this is the way we should go forward. And we started doing a lot of new development based on that, and it's been very, very effective. The product itself, when we came up with it, had to be very, very different. So we had new ways of, and I'll talk about it in a minute, but this product you see there is new way. It's a completely new way of housing a watch movement inside a watch. The steel was 7 times harder than normal stainless steel, and I'll see you all glaze over in a minute, but it was very, very geeky in the watch market, and that really helped. But also we turned it on its, the way we marketed ourselves, we turned it a little bit on its head. So every watch brand was going to a place called Basel in Switzerland. And 4 years ago, we pulled out and said, actually, it's a Swiss watch show. Let's do something ourselves. Let's do it differently. You have to do things differently, especially if you're sort of the minnow against the LVMHs, the Swatches, and the Richemonts, and the Gucci Group, and those sort of people. So we went and did a Bremel townhouse. Every year we hire a big building in the UK, and we just do things differently. And you fly people in, and you have their time. Instead of having 20 minutes with a journalist at Basel, you had them for the whole day or 2, and you can take them to Henley and show them around. Our watch stores, we have a number of our own stores. We sell through a couple of hundred others, the Watches Switzerland sell to people around the world. But our own stores, instead of just having glass and metal and doing the things that every watch brand was doing, it was actually, let's put a bar in there. And let's make it more club-like. And I'll show you in a minute how effective that was. But also early days, this was actually quite relevant to you guys. But 10 years ago, no luxury brand was doing social media. How would we, as a brand that had effectively started 2007, our first watch? So the worst thing my brother and I did when we started in 2002 was telling our wives, saying, look, darlings, it's going to be 1.5 years before you see the first watch. And 5 years later, we still hadn't delivered the first watch because it took a lot longer than we thought. But in 2007, when we were ready, how do you get the message out around the world? And nobody in the luxury market it was vulgar. Social media was completely vulgar. So we took it on. And it was the way we grew the brand in America and Asia and Middle East. And it was very, very important to us. But also, you embrace these reality shots of people doing amazing things. Everyone's doing it now. But for us, it really did make a big, big difference. The other sort of brand, how do you say it? I suppose the brand pillar for us is this adventure. So it's about producing a beautifully engineered watch. So we love Michalka watches. We love vintage watches. Our father had an old collection of watches, which we still have to this day. And they meant so much to us back then, and they still do now. In hindsight, they're all a bit ropey, and there's nothing particularly special, but they all have an incredible story attached. They mean so much to us. But they're all very fragile. We want to produce a Michalka watch, which was beautifully engineered, but very robust. So it came down to putting these watches on amazing people doing amazing things when we started, and that sort of carried on there. So our motto is sort of tested beyond endurance. So I don't know if you've been following people like Nims. Nims is currently climbing the 14 highest mountains in the world, over 8,000 meters. The current record stands at 8 years. He's done 12 in 6 months at the moment. Is ex-SBS, ex-Gurkha. What he's doing is phenomenal. But, he's taking the watches with him. You've got people like Foxy on SBS. You've got Jake, who's just climbed K2. And you've got Ben Saunders there, who recreated Scott's through it. These people are doing amazing things, but also testing watches. I think our first ambassador was Charlie Borman, Charlie and Ewan, going up a long way down on their motorbikes, but 4 months on a motorcycle. We learned a huge amount from that. I'm trying to figure out why our PR girls picked Ross Edgley, but there are some amazing people doing some amazing things. And based on that, we also have a thing called, I'll show you in a minute, Bremel Adventurers Club, where these guys come in every month and talk to us. Just carrying on the whole adventure spirit, this is my brother. This is a few years after my accident. So you can imagine my mother by this time is getting slightly tetchy about us going flying. So if any of you want to come flying with us, do let us know, because we still do quite a lot. He's fine though. There he is. Look, but his phone, look, the watch was fine, but his phone wasn't. That's the different disposable technology. There you go. There he is. He's fine there. He broke his back in a few places. The other pillar for our brand is this aviation military thing. So probably a third of our business now is military around the world, but it came from work we'd done with some incredible squadrons, but also, I suppose, our DNA. We had to make these brand pillars very obvious. and the aviation military one. And you've got some incredible people, several hundred squadrons around the world using these watches. And again, for social media and for just pure marketing pleasure, you get some incredible, this is 80,000 feet over somewhere in a U-2 spy plane. And there are some really, really cool images. And the military has continued. We do a lot with the armed forces. Things, Invictus is a big part of our charitable side. You do, with the only watch brand to the Armed Forces Covenant, and again, there's some amazing stories come out from these incredible people. This is quite a nice thing for the brand. It was all about working directly with the Ministry of Defence and Her Majesty's Armed Forces to produce a mechanical watch. The last military mechanical watch made was probably in the 60s again. So this is quite a lovely thing for the sort of history books of Bremont to be doing. But what is our mission? So I think Giles and I, if we can look back in 20 years' time and what was Bremont about, for us it would have been able to say we played a small part in the reinvigoration of watchmaking in this country. It'd be lovely to be able to walk away and say, actually, there's more watch brands, and already there's sort of more brands starting in the UK, which is fantastic. And we need, in Switzerland, the market's very horizontally integrated with lots of people doing different things, and it fosters more and more, more and more business in that area, and that's what we're trying to do now. But going through all of this, the thing that really stuck out, and I think Paulina was mentioning it earlier, this whole thing about customer satisfaction is absolutely clear. So important for us. Getting the customer in the first place is exactly what Paulina was saying, is just a tiny bit. It's how you look after them afterwards. And it is about taking this person, making them feel immensely special. You've got to make them feel like rock stars, really. You really do. And when they buy them, so we do various things like these adventurers clubs where people can come along, where talk to you. So you might have a Bear Grylls coming and talking. You might have Charlie. You might have Ian Callum, chief designer of Jaguar and Aston Martin, coming along and talking about adventure and design. Anyone actually Giles and I find interesting, you get along. But it is really important, and is again, point you could have written my speech. This is people do connect with people. It's not about after the product, it's about interaction, and that's one of the most important parts. And you suddenly become part of this Bremont family. And so CRM for us was really, really important from day one, and how we communicate with our client customer base, and again from that partnerships, etc. And these are our stores. But it is a bloody complex business. You're looking at, we're a design company at one end, but you're in a market company. We're sitting down designing this product. You're then, you're machining. So you go and you'll see a bar of metal in Henley going in and these parts coming out. You're manufacturing the part. You're trying to put them together. You're retailing. So you own your own stores, and you're trying to work on how you run these stores and staffing and displays, all the marketing material there. But then at the end of the day, you are a marketing company. You can have the best brand in the world, but if people don't know about you, again, it's not going to do brilliantly. So we do put a lot of emphasis on that. And I think these are sort of the key things for me that really stood out. Is I think for any brand when starting, the passion has to be there. And I think people can detect, can't they? My wife can always detect when I'm lying. And I think it's the same with your customers. And I think they've got to know that passion's real. The authenticity I talked about earlier on is important. And especially now, everybody knows everything. On the internet, people go in and they're asking questions which 10 years ago, they wouldn't have had a clue. And you've got to have these glass walls where everyone can look in, which is why we're building that new facility. So people come along and kick the tires. I want to know where that, saying made in England, I want to see where that part is actually made. And there's not a sort of shipment coming around the back from somewhere else. And that's really, really important. And obviously, we all have to be smart. That's quite important. But the innovation is really, really important. And for us, the thing that really, I think we differentiated ourselves from certainly the majority of brands when we started with this was this ability to tell stories. So a watch is a watch for most people. It's round, it's normally with 3 hands, it tells the time. But what is the difference between that brand? If you go into Selfridges, go into Watches of Switzerland, there may be 40 brands there. But why would someone go for your brand? And it's about telling stories. And one of our very early storytelling exercises came from this partnership here with Martin Baker. You probably saw Jimmy Fallon with that watch with the red barrel earlier on. You can only get that watch if you've ejected from an aircraft. This company, Martin Baker, makes 70% of the world's fighter ejection seats. And they came to us about 12 years ago and said, look, if you eject from one of our aircraft, you get a really ropey tie and you get a badge. And nobody wears a tie. I'm going to make sure I always insult someone. And these ties look like they could go up in flames at any moment. And they said it'd be really nice if we could design a watch with them, which they would subsidize, but you can only get, again, as I said, if you ejected. So we said, great. But they said, look, yeah, but the watch has got to go through the same testing of the ejection seats themselves. And these ejection seats might sit in an aircraft for 40 years. They might be on an aircraft carrier. They might be in Nevada, with the heat. They might be in Alaska. They'll be at 80,000 feet. They'll be landing on an aircraft carrier with salt fog. There'll be all these different scenarios. And the watch, they've got the most incredible environmental testing facility. So we started putting our watches through this, and they were destroyed. And we were going, oh dear, we promised we'd be able to deliver this thing. And our technical director at the time said, actually, let's come up with this idea of suspending the movement inside the watch in a special suspension mount. And we did it, and they started passing. And that's what led to all of our military work. It was telling this story about, wow, this is a mechanical watch, but it's immensely robust. And the whole story, and they've saved 7,600 lives to date. It's a British company based near Denham. M25, M40, and it is just the most incredible place to go and see. So that was a bit of a story. Obviously, Jaguar, we've worked with for 10, 12 years. Fell in love because he's such a brilliant guy. Ian Cowan, the chief designer, where he came from Aston Martin. We designed the DB7, the 9, the Vanquish. This Bond villain car at the bottom. And we did various lovely projects with him. We've just done an Aston Martin thing with him as well. But we ended up designing, the clocks, the Royal Jaguars, and ended up with a line of watches for Jaguar. But again, it was a storytelling. It was about working with this new continuation lightweight E-type, and press needs stories to write about. Otherwise, again, it's a round watch with 3 hands. America's Cup was another good one. It's the first British timer since 1865 to be involved with the America's Cup. But just to finish off, one of the watches themselves, how do you tell a story? And we started, again, in 2008, we started with our first watch, which they all had we'll do one limited edition in the year with a charitable angle on it. And the money goes to charity, and it's something quite special. It's basically historical, and it's, again, whatever Giles and I find interesting. And it started with these 2 watches here, both built with very famous parts of aircraft, and a P-51 and a Spitfire, from very famous ones from the Second World War. And when they came out, they were at sort of £6,000. Now they go for about £26,000. So they've gone up in value. And now this one here, Codebreaker, we work with Bletchley Park, and that's got the original parts of an Enigma machine built into the movement, and part of Alan Turing's hut in the crown. But from the front, it just looks like a beautiful watch. But from the back, it tells a whole story. HMS Victory, original copper and wood oak, that was at the Battle of Trafalgar, as certified by the First Sea Lord. Again, monies went to the restoration of the ship. And this is probably one of the most exciting ones. This had original fabric from the 1903 Wright Flyer, Orville Wilbur Wright's first ever aircraft. So he met up with the Wright family, and it was all about restoring the Dayton family home in Ohio. But there's stories, and obviously the product's got to keep up with the story itself. But if you combine the two, and we only do one of these once a year, and our launch, I think, for this year's is in a couple of weeks' time. But we've done them with BA. You probably saw that Concorde one, the last flying Concorde, and it's storytelling plays a big part. The last couple of slides. Obviously, movies help. Makes a big difference. So if you can get in the movies, Kingsman is a big thing for us because it's suddenly eyeballs all over the world. It's not just in a magazine in the UK. Tom with his Venom. And there you go. A few Bremont spotteds there. There you go. I'm acutely aware of time there, but I'm here for as many questions as you like. So. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Yeah, we've got a few few questions coming in. Thank you very much. That was very entertaining, very enjoyable, entertaining, and very interesting and inspiring as well. So thank you for sharing the story.
Pleasure. Absolute pleasure.
Lots of questions have come in, so you're going to be a busy man outside because we will need to wrap up. But I'm going to ask you a few.
Yeah, please.
A couple of people have asked, what is the origin of the name Bremont, and how do you assess the no doubt many adventurers that come to you for sponsorship?
Okay.
2 questions there.
So the adventurers, quickly, that is obviously doing something quite special. There are quite a few people doing special things, and these special things get more and more special as time goes on. I don't know how these adventurers come up with the next thing, and there's some pretty crazy things you get. But I think our general rule is, who do you enjoy working with? I think our longest serving ambassadors are the ones that are just really nice people.
Right.
And I know that sounds a bit lame, but they are. And they've all become really good friends in themselves.
Yeah.
Because life's a bit short to work with.
You clearly enjoy what you do.
So there's
the Bremont name.
The Bremont name. When I talk about authenticity at the beginning, we didn't want to buy a brand. And having a surname like English was... slightly hard to trademark, and an English watch company the irony would have been lost on a lot of people. So 2 years after my father's accident, or my accident, Giles got me back up in the air quite quickly, right. Metal arms and stuff. And as kids, we're very fortunate. We'd go off and we'd fly. My parents gave us a huge amount of kind of responsibility from quite a young age. So I'd be 17, Giles would be 15, and our summer holiday would be going off a 1940s airplane with the stipulation off to Europe and by ourselves, with the stipulation that we rang Mum once a week just to tell her where we are. So you'd cross the channel following the ferry, hoping it was going from Dover to Calais, and it'd be going to Ostend or something, and then you and we're doing another one of these trips 2 years after, and we had a forced landing in a field in France. And if you do that in America or England even, you buy the farmer a bottle of whiskey and take his wife for a flight, and everything's very easy. And France is very, very bureaucratic. So we landed in this pea field, and the chap who came out to help us, Giles went hitchhiking with a rather good-looking French woman to get some fuel. I was left pushing this airplane in a hangar with a 78-year-old man who we stayed with for 3 days, and had our father lived another 30 years, our father's 49 when he died, right. Had he lived another 30, this was our father. He used to fly, had a workshop full of parts. It was just, and his name was Antoine Bremont. Right. So when it came to naming the brand, for the first 3 years of making Bremont, we didn't have a name. It just had watch written on it, because that wasn't important to us. It was about getting the product right. But so that's where it came from.
Very good, a good story. When you're working in the city, someone said in 10 years' time, if you work hard, you'll be... Where will you be in 10 years from now? Where will Bremont be in 10 years from now?
It's really hard. I think this new facility is very exciting. I mean, it really, and please, you must all, July it's open. If you ever want to come out and have a look, it's quite exciting.
Is that an open invite for everyone here?
It is indeed. No, seriously, because it's quite interesting, and I love seeing engineering in this country. I think it's a bit of more of the same. I would love to. Obviously, we make about 12,000 watches a year, but this is designed to make a chunk more than that.
Right.
And I think if you can grow, and I'd like just walking around and seeing more people having learnt the trade, so to speak, is very, very special. And so a bit of more of the same, really. And that movement is a big, big project.
Right,
it's like building a whole new engine. So
someone has asked a slight cheeky question. But how much do watchmakers make, and can they work from home?
Can they work from home? Home is difficult, actually. I tell you, it's because there's so much. We have, so this new place has got, for example, it has positive air pressure for dust. It has special filters. It has, and the equipment for testing. You have, testers that go down to 2 kilometers for water pressure and all that. It's quite hard. It's a lot of expense. Some do occasionally, but not really, unless they have incredible setup. How do they, they can range from, I suppose, 20 to 60 grand, upwards. They depending on experience.
You might have a few applications.
Yeah, go for it.
Final question, because conscious of the time. You mentioned your Fuck It fund.
Yes.
And there'll be people in this room who manage budgets and P&L.
Yeah.
That might be interesting to them. How important has that fund been? How instrumental has it been in the development of Bremont and your product?
Listen, you can't do that with everything, because we do have a board,
Exactly,
and they would sort of get get wind of it. I think it's been really interesting for.
How do you stop them getting wind of it? I thought everyone wants to know.
I think the interesting thing early on, it allowed us to do stuff which, you know, a machine to machine a case is probably £1 million.
Right.
So that's one machine. So you can't really put that through the fund.
Yeah.
But what you can do is say, right, I'm going to try finishing this movement here in the UK and not sending out somewhere else. And it might be a machine which is 15, 20 grand, and that would be in that fund.
Right.
We've got to stop swearing.
Yeah.
And then you say, actually, we can do this, or polishing, and you can do it with the sort of smaller things. So it's an R&D fund, really.
Yeah, very good, very good. Okay, one more question. What will it? You talked actually a very interesting story about how Switzerland came to be kind of dominant in the watch market. How does Britain get back into that position?
What's quite interesting, our competition is Switzerland. I know in terms of the quality, in terms of how they produce. What's interesting about the UK is we can compete with Switzerland. You know, our cost base is lower than Switzerland. Cost of living in the UK, in Switzerland is phenomenal.
Yeah.
The problem is, you know, what we can't do is, and we're not trying to, is compete with, you know, a lot of the watch brands that are having all their parts made in Asia. We're not trying to do that, but we can. And what the Switzerland did in the sort of 1920s, 30s, is what they mechanized it. So instead of having the artisanal 10 watchmakers making 10 beautiful watches a year, which is the UK approach, they said, actually, we're going to get that machine that's going to make 2,000 of those cases, 2,000 of those parts. And they became very, very good at it. Our approach at Bremont is very, very high-tech. You saw some of the kit. It's really, really high-tech. Yeah. That's the way we compete. So because you can't have 20 people polishing one case, you have a automated CNC polishing, you know, set up, and then you hand finish it after that. And that's the way Switzerland. So we are nicking a few ideas from Switzerland. But
I do have one more question. Is e-commerce an opportunity or a threat for Bremont?
A huge opportunity. Yeah. I think we're always, it's got to be a level playing field. You know, we sell through a lot of retailers, and we're not trying to piss them off. But if you can give that customer a better experience, and you know, if you're living in Alabama and your nearest store is 100 miles away, and you can get that watch shipped to you the next day or 2 days' time, that's a benefit to the customer. But we also work very close to the retailer, where we'll say, right, actually this lead is very close to you, put that through to them. And I think it's a balance, and it's not about just, it is about working together.
Very good. Well, I'm very conscious of the time, so I have to say thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's been an absolute
pleasure. Very much indeed. Thank you.
Very much. I'll take that.
Thank you. Take that.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
If we could go on to the next slide, my clicker stopped working, please. And that brings us to the end of the afternoon. And that's what I want to say. Thank you very much to a great many people. Thank you to the speakers who are mostly here, and to the panelists who are over to my left, who've put in a huge amount of time to prepare for today and to come up here and share their insights and their inspirational stories with you. So one more round of applause, please, for our speakers and panelists today. This event takes an awful lot of planning and a lot of energy from our marketing team and from others who get involved. So thank you very much to the people at the back who make this happen today. It's been a brilliant event, and we really do appreciate it. And likewise, thank you to Google for giving us this amazing venue. Really appreciate you having us here, joining us in the schedule, and supporting us throughout the day in the run-up to it. So thank you very much. And then finally, thank you really to all of you who have chosen to give your afternoon to be here with us here in London or on the live stream. We really do appreciate it. We know that you're all busy people, especially as we're heading into final quarter of the year. So really, thank you very much. Really do appreciate it, and we look forward to seeing you next time. We are welcoming you outside now for more drinks. There's some alcoholic drinks, I think, as well, for those of you who would like, some tea, coffee, soft drinks, and some food. And I think our speakers and panelists will be there as well for any further questions and that you would like to ask them. And just please enjoy the space and network. And then we'll be having some drinks downstairs in a nearby bar as well. So thanks very much, everyone, and we look forward to seeing you next time.